And welcome to UofL Today with Mark Hebert on 1080 WKJK and iHeartMedia. We're so glad you're joining us, hopefully for the next half hour or so. Maybe you'll learn something about the University of Louisville and what's going on at UofL. On the show today, 33 states have legalized the use of medical marijuana. Kentucky has approved limited use of medical marijuana. Will it help people with Parkinson's disease? We'll talk about it. And UofL has had more winners of prestigious Fulbright International Scholarships in the past 16 years than all other Kentucky schools combined, 133 as a matter of fact. You'll meet two of them later in the show. But first, the University of Louisville was asked to do a study and make recommendations on how Louisville could get a handle on its homelessness problem. Lora Haynes is a psychology professor, and Kelly Kinahan is a professor in urban and public affairs at UofL. They both are UofL faculty members who worked on this homelessness project. Well, welcome to both of you. Good to see you again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Yep.
All right, so who came to you and said, you know what, we want UofL to help us out with this homelessness problem in the city of Louisville? How'd that all happen?
So it was both the Coalition for the Homeless, which is our local service provider, one of our local service providers that work with the homeless community, as well as the Louisville Metro Government Office of Community Services.
Well, I think most folks that have been in Louisville over the last several months, last couple of years, know we've got a homelessness problem here in Louisville. The city broke down an encampment of folks in the downtown area that were camped out on the sidewalk. There's been overcrowding at some of the shelters, those kinds of things. So you did this study, looked at the whole problem. What did you all find out? What'd you find, and what are your recommendations? Let's start with findings.
Sure. So, we came up with a series of recommendations and findings that are in the report, just sort of with a combination of sort of studying what national best practices are around homelessness, and particularly the unsheltered homeless population, around dealing with encampments, and sort of what are some of the best strategies that local governments and service providers can take, and then thinking about the connections between poverty, affordable housing, and homelessness. So that's really what centers our recommendations.
And at the time, right, the only low barrier shelter that Wayside had going was just about to open. Like, we had no idea leading up to during the call for proposals, or as we wrote our proposal and got it accepted, that Wayside would be opening this low barrier shelter on December 24th. But much of what we did in our preliminary work was really kind of think about and learn about what was happening here with some of those emergency funds, not just the Wayside Low Barrier, but other of the storage spaces and other of the efforts with that emergency funding were going like. And we also were learning, as Kelly said, about what were other communities, other cities doing, how was that going, what does low barrier even mean, in terms of current on the ground efforts.
So low barrier means you can get in without a lot of stipulations, basically.
It also means, because most shelters are going to require other things, like that you participate in programs, you're going to be sober, you're not going to be someone who's been kicked out before, right? So low barrier means that we're going to let you in. It does not mean no barriers, but we're going to let you in even if you've been kicked out of all the other shelters prior. So
again, we're talking with Kelly Kinahan. She's a professor in urban and public affairs, and Lora Haynes, who's a psychology professor at the University of Louisville, and they worked on this homelessness study for the city of Louisville and the Coalition for the Homeless. All right, well, let's get right to it. What were some of your major recommendations on how Louisville should be dealing with this problem?
So building off of the low barrier shelter conversation, one of our recommendations was about having a series of low barrier shelters. So a series of smaller low barrier shelter spaces that were specific to some of the homeless subpopulations. So a specific low barrier shelter for families, for women with children, for people experiencing substance abuse, and making sure that those are potentially having that as sort of a series of shelters dispersed throughout Jefferson County, so that people experiencing homelessness across the county could have access to that.
Okay. So
and combine with that this idea that, while many entities in the city are engaged in training surrounding trauma-informed care, we really focused a lot about the importance of really adhering to trauma-informed care and those best practices. And then also, recognizing the need that we were hearing from people we interviewed, both outreach and service provider entities as well as people living currently on the streets, that they really felt this was not necessarily the most welcoming exchange they've ever had as they've come into shelter space. And that's, not just Louisville. That's,
Right.
we're understaffed. We have, so really this idea of a caring space, a climate of care, as we called it, and also working really hard on more warm handoffs.
We're going through the homelessness report that UofL helped put together for the city of Louisville and some recommendations. One of the things you all talked about in your report was these clearances of the encampments when several homeless folks get together and are in one area. The city there's quite a hubbub about the way the city cleared those camps. So what recommendations did you make about that? They're going to happen again. So what recommendations did you make?
I think some of the biggest things are that the city is currently doing some really smart things surrounding giving, kind of a notice of eviction, as we would do for any other person, living in a space, an awareness of here's how much time you have to get your things together, get yourself together, find another space. The things we would really wish for to add to that are that when there's a clearing about to happen, that we actually assure that services are provided to individuals, including, recommendations surrounding shelter, that you don't just expect someone to go find another place that they can hide away or get out of the public view, but instead they actually have, support surrounding that transition.
And sort of the national best practice around that is making sure that there's actually shelter space for them to go to before you clear that encampment. So guaranteeing that within our local ordinance would be one way that we could improve
A couple of quick questions. Affordable housing, obviously Louisville, like many other cities, doesn't have enough affordable housing. That was one of your recommendations.
Absolutely.
With more affordable housing and revised zoning ordinances. What did you mean by that?
So being able to build more densely across our single-family zoning districts, so to build more multifamily housing, to have more housing opportunities available across Jefferson County that can be affordable, so smaller units that are potentially affordable to our lowest income populations.
And break down some barriers on the criminal justice system for some of these homeless folks. What do you mean by that? What's that recommendation mean?
Right. Ban the box is a good answer to that. I think allowing individuals who might want employment to actually get employment and move forward from whatever mistakes they've made to date, and to provide incentives for people who might be willing to employ or house individuals who are in those situations.
Now that you've looked at this, we'll kind of wrap on this note. There are folks out there who see folks panhandling on the side of the road, and they hear folks say, these folks that are homeless, a lot of them, you know what, they don't want to live in a house. They don't want to be in shelter. They want to live out in the woods someplace or on by the side of the road. From your experience and from this study, what'd you find? Is that true?
This is a really great question, and we've spent a lot of time talking about this. We all, the team of 6 of us, have different opinions, but we all, I think, agree that no one would really wish to live in many of these circumstances and the conditions that they've, resourcefully created for themselves. No one would probably wish to live in the kind of fear or the ambiguity or the lack of safety or the lack of sanitation that many of these individuals are faced with. So the idea that if we could make shelter and housing for individuals in these situations more welcoming, make them more of a climate of care, right? Where, again, you're not just another number and you're not having to repeat your story many, many times. Every time you transition from one shelter or one resource to another, having to repeat your story, we know that's likely another way people are re-traumatized, right? That transition. And it's just like if you were interviewing a kid who's, been victimized in some way. We know better than to ask that kid 100 different times, 100 different, interviewers. It's best practice to say, find a way to gather the information one time as best you can in good, warm, safe spaces.
Right. And I think the balance of that is being able to have a system that meets people where they are. So even if they are currently on the street, to be able to continue to work with them and sort of accompany them through the time and space that they need to be able to potentially enter a shelter or enter housing, we need to be able to do both of those things.
Of course, a lot of it takes money, and that's a whole nother question for the elected officials to deal with. All right. Lora Haynes, Kelly Kinahan, always good to see you. Kentucky has legalized limited use of medical marijuana. It's one of a handful of states who have dipped their toes in the water of full-blown legalization of medical marijuana. Indiana, by the way, is not one of those states. Steve Lippman is a psychiatrist by trade and directs UofL's nationally known observership program for highly qualified foreign medical graduates. And Dr. Diksha Mohanty is a neurology resident at the University of Louisville. And they're here to talk about, well, can marijuana, medical marijuana, be used to treat Parkinson's? Dr. Mohanty, welcome to the show. Good to see you.
Thank you, Mark.
And Steve, always good to see you.
Yes,
Glad
sir.
you're here.
Thank you.
All right, Diksha, you've done some research on whether marijuana is a good fit for folks with Parkinson's disease, right? What'd you tell me about your research and what you found?
So, marijuana is lately finding a lot of usage in medicine. Previously, we know it's being used as an antiemetic, as an anxiolytic, and pain as a pain med even. So there have been recent reports that it works in Parkinson's disease to alleviate some of the very disabling motor symptoms of Parkinson's disease. Although there haven't been many patient studies, and the ones that have been done are kind of limited in their sample size, but a lot of promising animal studies show that it can have a very prominent effect on motor symptoms by reducing tremors, by reducing stiffness and rigidity and bradykinesia. And
Movement,
also,
in other
Right,
movement.
movement.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so it could have. So there's some limited
Yes,
again studies
yes.
that
And
show-
not proven.
and
Not proven.
Limited
It's
studies.
it's mostly anecdotal reports or surveys, but it's not studying the drug in a blind fashion.
But in some of these instances, it shows that the tremors that Parkinson's patients sometimes suffer, that the medical marijuana can have an
Yeah.
impact on those. Again,
Yeah.
And the Federal Drug Administration has not approved it for use. It's
Right.
Off-label use. It's a individual physician might elect.
right.
Yeah.
So these limited studies, I'll call them studies or anecdotal evidence. What's your take on it? I mean, you kind of looked at this. Do they show? I mean, do you have a reason to believe that medical marijuana may actually work with Parkinson's patients, or are you skeptical?
The studies that have been done in patient populations, they are, like I said, they're very limited in sample size, and there were no outcome measures, and it wasn't properly done. But the animal studies have been quite promising in that they show neuroprotection against inflammatory and noxious stimuli. They prevent dopaminergic system degeneration, which causes Parkinson's disease, and also an effect on non-motor symptoms, which are really disabling, like mood and memory, sleep, fatigue, and all of these other symptoms.
Anxiety.
Anxiety, yes.
So folks with Parkinson's that we're talking about, those are older folks. We've talked on this show before.
Not necessarily. It's most common.
Okay.
There's many ways you can get Parkinsonism, like from head injuries and that sort of. There's many poisonings.
So there are some instances of young people getting Parkinson's. is
Yes,
what you're
but it's
saying,
most common in older folks.
Steve. Okay. Well, what I was getting at is, Steve, you and I have talked about on this program before about marijuana use in young minds and how it impacts, teenagers. That there is some deleterious effect on.
Well, it is
young minds.
not good for the developing brain. So younger people up to 25 or 30 probably shouldn't take marijuana. And my generation, it would be okay, but that doesn't mean that it's good for you.
Right. So I guess that then the question becomes for future studies: Do you go ahead and study perhaps a 25-year-old or a 20-year-old with Parkinson's, and also have a field of folks that are over 60 with Parkinson's? Is that what
Sure,
we're
but
talking about here?
obviously in this particular discussion that we're doing, it would be older people, because you're
Right.
not going to. It would be much more fruitful to treat Parkinsonism in 70-year-olds than it would in 17-year-olds.
Steve, in the past, this whole medical marijuana thing has kind of burst on the scene in the last probably 5 to 10 years, and I think there's now 33 states, I believe, that have approved medical
And
marijuana.
DC.
And DC, and then there's, like I said, these states like Kentucky have kind of dipped their toes in the use of medical marijuana under very restrictive things. But in recent years, we hear about that marijuana can be used for all sorts of ailments. from your perspective, as a guy who's been around for a while, has that gone too far?
I think
it could treat everything, in other words?
Well, doctors usually say if something's good for everything, it may not be good for anything, or it may be good for just one of them. I mean, right now it is a fad, and incidentally, you said, like so many states have legalized it. It's not legal on army or military bases, so even if you live in California or Colorado where it's legal, you can't bring it back to your house if you live on the base. It's interesting that we have a sort of a dichotomy there. It has been approved this week, or last week, for the use of certain very, very extremely rare epilepsies. It is the first FDA approval of a marijuana product. That's the CBD oil. CBD oil. And so, but that is the only approved use.
Well, that was something else I was going to ask about, because we've got these CBD oil shops and CBD, you can buy candies with CBD oil in them and those kinds of things. In Kentucky, here in Louisville, their shops are popping up all over the place. So what's the difference between the CBD oil, which everybody is talking about, they're advertising on the radio as this cure-all for a lot of different ailments, and medical marijuana, which we're talking about treating Parkinson's or other diseases? What's the difference?
Well, marijuana products are available in with varying proportions of THC, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, and cannabidiol. One of these is the THC part is the more psychoactive, and CBD is the more therapeutic. So medical marijuana, I believe, contains more CBD, and
supposed to,
and so it has more of an effect on mood and fewer side effects, hopefully.
Talking with Dr. Diksha Mohanty, who's a neurology resident at the University of Louisville, and also with Steve Lippman, who's a psychiatrist by trade and directs UofL's nationally known observership program at UofL. Again, we've only got a couple minutes left. So what point would you like to make to folks out there who are listening and perhaps they've got a loved one with Parkinson's or they have Parkinson's? What would you tell them about medical marijuana, or should they go seek a state where it's legal and buy medical marijuana so they can self-medicate?
I think the answer to that is pretty clear. You see a neurologist that is an expert in movement disorders and try the usual things first, and then if that isn't satisfactory, well, then at physician discretion and with everybody in agreement, then you can try the CBD oil.
Dr. Mohanty, same?
Yes, same.
The same thing?
Yeah.
So you would not recommend that somebody just go to some state next door to Kentucky that has medical marijuana?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And CBD oil, what would you tell them about that? If they have Parkinson's and they've heard the advertisements on TV or seen them on the or seen them on TV, heard them on the radio about CBD oil, what would you tell them about that?
Well, I think it's best to rely on scientific evidence on what is already out there about what really works and what doesn't. So it's best to get your doctor's opinion on that.
Okay.
But obviously, it's like any over-the-counter drug. I mean, CBD oil is now like over-the-counter. So if you wanted, you could smear it on your skin for your anything you wanted to do. But we're not recommending it for Parkinson unless a Parkinson expert says, I think it might be worth a try.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to your research on this important topic, Dr.
Yes.
Diksha Mohanty.
Yeah.
All right. Again, thanks to both of you, Dr. Diksha Mohanty, Steve Lippman. Always good to see you. Since 2003, the University of Louisville has had 133 students who have won prestigious international scholarships called Fulbrights, and two of them are sitting right in front of me here. They are Macey Mays and Kyle Hilbrecht. Kyle just got back, and Macey's getting ready to go on her Fulbright. So welcome back, Kyle.
Thank you so much.
And Macey, congratulations on winning a Fulbright.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And we should tell everybody that there's a love story involved here, too, isn't
There
there?
is.
There is.
Yes.
So what's the love story involved here? Explain it to us.
Would you rather me do this?
You're both McConnell scholars.
Yes. So
Okay.
we met when we were at the University of Louisville as McConnell scholars. We were best friends for about 4 years, and then right before we took off on our individual times abroad, him on his Fulbright and me on my Boren to Indonesia, we were like, let's give long distance a shot.
So
Well,
you did.
I mean, we went to. So we were lucky enough to go to Oxford with McConnell Center, or right after we graduated, and so we got together right before school ended, and then we went and traveled Europe for a month. and came back. And
Isn't
then,
that the way it always works? You get together right before school ends.
That's
and then-
yeah, because it was.
Yeah.
Your timing was not great on
No,
that.
It was
it
not.
sucked.
The timing was
yeah, it
always
not
off.
good.
But now you're getting ready to get married. And
Yeah, we
so
are.
We are,
Congratulations
yeah.
to both of you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
All right, well, let's talk. I guess first, Macey, you just got back from one international scholarship called the Bourne. So what is the Bourne Scholarship, and where were you, and what'd you do?
Yeah, so the David L. Bourne Scholarship is through the National Security Education Program, which is a part of the Department of Defense. And it's a program where they take students who want to learn critical languages, like languages that are critical to national interest. They send them abroad, and you learn that language. And then you come back and do a year of service for the federal government. So I have to do a year of service. I can do it in any of the Tier 1 programs that they've chosen for us, Department of Defense, the CIA, FBI, things like that. So I just finished that for Bahasa, Indonesia. And what's fortunate is a lot of my language skills will actually transfer to Bahasa Melayu, which is Malaysian language. So when we go to Malaysia in January on my Fulbright, some of the language skills are going to transfer,
Okay.
which is really fortunate because I need to know how to order food and, ask where the bathroom is and things like that.
Yeah, I got you. All right, and Kyle, you just got back from where?
I got back from Laos.
Laos.
So yes, I spent
Okay.
11
Southeast
months.
Asia.
Yeah, 11 months teaching English in Laos through the Fulbright program. I was an English teaching assistant in a small town called Savannakhet, and through that I got to meet just so many wonderful people, and I don't know. It's run through the State Department. It's not run through the Department of Defense, and so there's a whole different network of people that I got to interact with. I got to talk to the ambassador of Laos, or the U.S. ambassador to Laos, and kind of work with the U.S. embassy during that year, and that was a really
Fulbright seems to be much more focused on people-to-people exchange, while my Bourne was very you're studying the language, you're going to take a test at the end of the year for this language, this is a skill that you will apply to your job. So I'm excited to go into an opportunity to spend more time really getting to know people.
And
Yeah.
that's what they told us going into it. When we were doing our orientation in the first couple of weeks, they said, you are here to teach English, but your primary goal is people-to-people exchange. So the
Kind of foster relationship.
Right. Yeah. It's to
It's humanizing diplomacy.
Yeah,
really.
it is.
Yeah.
It's soft diplomacy where you send people who are excited about teaching and foreign service into countries across the world that you have on the ground interpersonal diplomacy.
Right. Talking with Kyle Hilbrecht and Macey Mays, who are two of the Fulbright scholars from the University of Louisville. Macey, as she just mentioned, and also won a Bourne, just got back a Bourne scholarship, and they're very prestigious scholarships, not won by everybody, but UofL has had a tremendous track record over the years of winning these, 133 since 2003. Okay.
Yeah.
So what was it like? Tell me, daily basis, did you have to go out and kill your own food? Did you have to, could you speak the language?
It's funny you mentioned
It's
that.
funny you
Really?
mentioned that,
Food
actually.
was killed for us often.
Yeah.
When I
so,
visited, yeah.
So, quick side note. So when we were, she came and visited me in Savannakhet when I was over there, and I had a really great relationship with my boss. His name was Sayapone. And Sayapone was like, okay, well, Macey's coming. We'll throw you an engagement party. And so they threw us a Lao engagement party. And at that Lao engagement party, we went to the market in the morning. It was 6 in the morning. She was still really, jet lagged.
Because I had just gotten to Laos. I'd never
Right,
visited
yeah,
really
right,
before.
right.
Yeah. And so we went to the market at 6 in the morning. It's how you would imagine an open air market to be. There's goats and sheep and
Right.
all this noise and vegetables and all of this stuff. And we go, and my boss is like, "Okay, which goat would you like?" And I'm like,
Excuse me?
I'm like, what?
He's like, yes, this is where we get the goat.
This
and we're
is
like,
where we
what?
get- yeah.
Why are we getting a goat? And he goes, for your honor. And, for my honor.
And then so I'm going, and I'm just like, what? We're standing there looking at this goat, and I'm like, well, I guess that's a good goat.
Old Freddie here. We'll take
Yeah.
Fred.
And so they just pick him up by its hind legs, throw him in the back of the trunk, and what
And
I
we
didn't-
took it home.
We took it home.
And he owned a goat for like 4 hours.
I did, and I didn't, and what you don't realize is goats kind of like yell like people, and so we're
So
like
it's in the back of the truck just screaming.
and we just hear like, "Ah!" like in the back of the trunk, and nobody's paying attention to this, and I'm like, is anybody? Oh, this is
going to
this
say
is-
something about the goat screaming
So
in the back.
so then they killed the goat for dinner.
They did.
Yeah.
So we were supposed to kill the goat.
We were supposed to kill the goat.
And
You were
we-
supposed to kill the
I
goat.
was. I
I
think
didn't.
you were.
I
I think
didn't.
Kyle was
I
supposed to
didn't.
kill the goat, but we ended up leaving so that the goat would get killed without us.
Again, we're talking with Macey Mays and Kyle Hilbrecht, who both won international scholarships from the University of Louisville. They're both graduates of UofL. And so, Macey, you went to Indonesia.
Yes.
What was it like there in terms of how people treated Americans?
So Indonesia is also in Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm.
I was treated very well. Everyone's very kind there. Interestingly enough, because Indonesia has so much tourism from Australia, it's actually Australians that they
Mm-hmm. Okay.
don't prefer there. They were interested to
Okay.
see Americans. There were a lot of people who asked, why I was there, why I was studying Indonesian,
Mm-hmm.
why Indonesia is important to the United States. So it was good being an American there rather than, for example, an Australian. Because Australians, I think, come a lot for tourism, but being an American there, people understood that you were there for a different purpose, for education. So it actually opened up a lot of conversations for me
So
with
the
the
personal
Indonesian
level
people.
was good. And Kyle, I'll ask you the same question. But was the perception of America, the country and the politicians, was it different than it was for you personally to deal with these folks, or was there no difference?
It was, there were several comments made whenever I would talk about being American. They go, oh, Donald Trump. But fortunately, people also remember Barack Obama because Barack Obama, if I'm correct, his stepfather is Indonesian. So he spent some of his childhood in Indonesia. So multiple people
Okay.
wanted to talk to me about that. Like, do
Gotcha.
you know Barack Obama? And I'm like, I don't, but I wish I did.
Yeah,
so that
I
was
gotcha.
that
I
was the
gotcha.
good
Yeah.
thing
And what
about
was it
being
like
an
in the house?
American.
It's similar. So,
Similar situation.
Barack Obama came and visited in 2013, I believe, to last. And so that was still, they're like, oh yeah, the U.S. president came.
That was cool.
Especially with
Yeah.
Laos being such a small country.
Yeah,
That's,
that
I
was a
think,
very
Yeah.
kind of momentous thing. As being an American, they were very like just on an interpersonal level, very excited. There's a lot of history with America in the Vietnam War and the kind of there's still a lot of
Right.
unexploded ordnance in that province where I was living in Savannah province, and so that's kind of a holdover. They like the younger generations are very excited to kind of have a relationship with the United States.
Right.
Everyone wants to go to the United States. Like that's the goal. United States, South Korea, Japan.
Right.
Those are the
The
three
older
countries.
folks may
Yeah.
not be the same way. All right,
Yeah.
we need to wrap this up here real quick. So you're getting ready to go to Malaysia on,
Yes.
on your Fulbright. Excited?
Yes, so
Okay.
excited.
Okay, you're ready to rock and roll there. You
Yes.
know a little bit of the language, which is good. What did you guys learn at the University of Louisville that helped you navigate where you've been across the world? What would you talk about your experience at UofL?
Well, I think our experience is specific also to the McConnell Center. So we would not be where we are without the McConnell Center, without the people within the McConnell program. It prepared me both for my international travel as well as how to conduct myself when I'm meeting new people, people of different cultures, specifically people who are in positions of power, because we've had so many opportunities to meet, ambassadors and Congress people and, Supreme Court justices. I think when you've met such a wide breadth of individuals that are so successful, when you meet, for example, ambassadors, you met the
Yeah.
Lao ambassadors, the United States ambassador to Laos.
Yeah.
You aren't as starstruck, and you can have a conversation and get over your nerves because, the McConnell Center and the University of Louisville prepared us for that.
Kyle Hilbrecht, Macey Mays, congratulations on your engagement and your future
Thank
marriage.
you.
Thank you
Good
so
luck in
much.
Malaysia to both of you, because Kyle, you're moving there with Macey,
I
right?
am.
Yeah.
So good luck in Malaysia, and
Yeah.
again, congratulations on your big wins on these scholarships.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
All right, that'll about do it for this edition of UofL Today with Mark Hebert, which you can hear every Monday night on Talk Radio 1080 WKJK. You can also listen to the podcast of the shows on SoundCloud or watch the programs on Metro TV and KETKY throughout the week. Check out all the UofL news, videos, and events at UofLnews.com. Thanks for listening to UofL Today with Mark Hebert. Go Cards.